This week on MBC Connect, I sat down with Johnny Grant and Elyse Davis discussing the strategic planning initiative for Milledgeville-Baldwin County. Thank you for joining us for this week's show of MBC Connect. I'm your host, April Bragg, and today I have Johnny Grant discussing the community-wide strategic planning initiative. Johnny, thank you for joining us today.
Glad to be here, April.
Yeah, well, let's talk about, I know the community-wide strategic plan has been in the news and certainly a topic of our conversation for certainly a while now. Tell us a little bit about how this process got started and really what community-wide strategic planning is.
Well, April, there's a lot of people in the community that have felt like one of the major needs that Milledgeville and Baldwin County had was to try to develop a long-range plan that the whole community could get behind. And so, there have been some efforts at doing this over the last several years. And a group of people started last summer trying to formalize what was going on. And then last fall, we agreed to hire a consultant, the Bridge Concepts, and we have started with developing a task force. We've got over 45 people from all walks of life, all demographics of the community that are serving as a task force. And we've met several times. We've had a lot of input that we've tried to get from the community as a whole, and I think the process is going very well right now.
Yeah, well, and I couldn't agree more. Being a part of this plan, tell me in your own words, really what you think sets this apart from any other planning that we've done in our community or that other communities have done. What makes this different?
I think the biggest thing that makes this different, April, is that we have deliberately put an implementation phase in this strategic plan. So when we get the plan finished, there are going to be some action steps and an implementation plan to actually see the plan go from just paper to some actual, some things that have been accomplished, some things that actually happen. And I think that's one of the things where a lot of plans fail in they put some directives in place and some goals, but they don't ever put the part in there that actually puts it into reality.
Yeah, well, and that reality is where we all live every day, and it's a part of what we all do at the chamber and as community members and leaders in the community. And I think the implementation piece was the piece that struck me most when we first had a conversation about this. Gosh, maybe a year ago or so when we first started talking. And talk a little bit about the broad-based approach with bringing in stakeholders from multiple entities and just sharing with our audience about the different parties that are at the table with this planning process.
Well, we've got a lot of the folks that you would think of as just regulars, the people that you would, the usual suspects, if you will, the colleges, the city and the county government, the hospital. Many of those came in early on and are participating and helping us develop the plan. But then we also reached down and we wanted to make sure that this represented the community demographically. So we've tried to have people from the African American community. We have representations from our Indian business community. We have people from the young parts of our community. We even have a focus group that's going to be held later this month with students from Georgia College to try to talk about ways that they would like to see the community grow and things that they would like to see happening in the community, and perhaps even ways that we could retain more of them after they graduate.
Yeah, well, and I think that's critical, the implementation piece, the broad-based involvement early on in the process, because so many times while a group of stakeholders is gathered to help in developing a plan, I think one of the neatest parts about this is the implementation process also assigns various entities, organizations, groups that are already functioning in our community components of that plan to take responsibility for, so it doesn't just fall on, you know, a committee who's assembled just to pull together a plan, but it really gives some ownership back to the entire community, as well as city and county governments who have vested in the program.
Yeah, I envision the final piece having some action items, and each action item has an accompanying a person or group that's responsible for that. And now there may be many partners in getting that action item completed, but ultimately there's one group that will be held accountable to make sure that that happens. And I believe that's going to be the key into moving Milledgeville forward.
Absolutely. Well, and we've got so many resources here, and I think that this will truly be a hallmark of the collaborative spirit that I think that Milledgeville, you know, has embodied for some time, but really something that we can boast going forward as a truly collaborative effort among all of the entities here. Let's talk a little bit. I think one of the biggest things that was from a visibility standpoint that the survey has done thus far, or the strategic plan has done thus far, is the survey. So tell us a little bit about how the particular survey methodology was determined and what those, you know, what that response was like.
Well, we decided that one of the things we wanted to do was to try to get as much input from the community as we could, and we thought one of the ways that we could do that was an internet-based survey. And so we had the survey designed by our consultants, and we had that survey go live in January, early part of January of this year. And as we moved forward, we had a lot of interest from the task force, and they went to their organizations, the places they worked, their groups that they were associated with, and they spread the news. They put the link out there for many, many people. And we ended up having over 1,500 responses. We also made paper surveys available for people who weren't comfortable with the internet, and we received about 100 paper copies, paper surveys back. So from what people tell me that are in the surveying business, 1,500 surveys from a community our size was huge, and we got some great responses. We had you know, some things that we asked about, but we also had some open-ended questions that allow people to say what was on their mind, and that provided some very, very rich input.
Yeah, well, that input is exactly what we'll be talking about when we come back. Stay with us. In our next segment, we'll be talking with Johnny Grant about the community-wide strategic plan, their survey, and the input they received. Stay tuned.
My new mom and I have a lot in common.
The great outside.
We both love the outdoors.
It's so shiny.
That's not a flower. We both love geology.
Oh, look. An igneous one.
That's not a rock. And she knows a lot about wildlife.
A labradoodle.
That's not a dog. Hanging out has been kind of fun.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of kids in foster care will take you just as you are.
Oh!
Checking your fantasy league?
Nah, just my 401k statement.
Nice. Where'd you find the money for that?
I just been saving a little every month.
I can't seem to save anything.
Well, what about all this? What about the money you're spending?
What money? It's gone before I can get my hands on it.
I got a pizza for a Todd.
Hey, can somebody spot me?
When it comes to financial stability, don't get left behind.
It's 547.
Get tools and tips for saving at feedthepig.org.
Everybody has a dream. Mine was to see the ocean. And with a little help, I made it.
Welcome back. I'm here with Johnny Grant, who is the chair of the Community-Wide Strategic Planning Initiative. And Johnny, when we left off, we were just talking about the survey that was done. So I guess let's just dig right in. Tell us a little bit about who participated in the survey, and then what they really thought.
April, we had good participation in the survey, as I mentioned earlier, over 1,500 people, and it was a wide variety of folks. We had the age group that responded was almost identical to the age dispersion that we have from the census in Baldwin County. The geographic dispersion was very similar. We had a few more people that responded from the northern side of town versus the southern side of town. Percentage-wise, but still pretty well geographically dispersed. The one area where we felt like we may not have gotten the best representation or the most representation was in the African American community, but we went from there creating some focus groups where we went into the African American community and actually got more input and some very, very good input in a variety of ways. They told us some things that we felt like we already knew, but it was great to have it validated by the citizens in the community. We have some wonderful resources here that many of us are familiar with: the higher education system, the lakes, the greenway, the library. We've got a number of activities and resources that many communities would love to have. We also have some areas that we need to work on. We need to work on some of our transportation issues. That came up over and over again, and the cooperation in the community. We have some things that we need to do with both city and county government cooperating, or the black and white communities cooperating better. So those are all some things that were identified that we can work on. But that's good that that we know some of the things that we can concentrate on to move forward.
Yeah. Well, let's. I think one thing to keep in mind that we haven't mentioned yet is one thing that I think is a key component of this plan is that everything that went into this planning initiative really centered around economic development. How can we move Milledgeville-Baldwin County forward? So, things that might be off on the fringes were intentionally not a focus of this plan. It was things that were about job and wealth creation and how to grow our community and ways to positively impact that. So, in addition to economic development, what were some of the other key initiatives that came up? You mentioned transportation. I know education was key. Quality of place, and I believe there was one other, let's see, education. Do you remember? Let's see if you've got your notes there. Yes, building capacity, engagement, and community image. And I think that goes back to the communication piece. So talk a little bit about that and sort of some of the feedback that we got.
Well, over and over, the number one issue that people wanted to improve was the number of jobs that were in the community, because a lot of people felt like the number of jobs translated into improvement in a variety of ways, both on the educational front, on the economic front, quality of place, the quality of life in general. If you've got a good job, you feel better about yourself, all those things. So undoubtedly the things that we have to do have to build towards how do we attract more jobs, how do we keep more jobs, how do we make the jobs that we have here even better. And so, some of those things that we know build into that are the education system. We have a lot of options for the higher education, for the post-secondary education here in Milledgeville. We have even a lot of options in the secondary category. A lot of, several high schools that you could attend in Milledgeville and Baldwin County. But we don't necessarily achieve the kind of excellence that I think our community wants throughout the whole public education system. So we've got to work on doing that, find ways that the community can support public education, support K through 12 education in general, because that builds the workforce, that makes a community more desirable for an industry or for a company that wants to come in, knowing that there is an educated workforce, and more than just an educated workforce today, a pipeline that is going to provide jobs for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you mentioned focus groups earlier, specific to the minority communities, but I think that's one thing also that's a key component of this is that based on the survey feedback, we've been able to go through with the planning team and identify other focus groups in the community specific to the issues that came out of this, and then the planning team is bringing in speakers to talk to the task force and other members of the community specific to the issues addressed, like education, transportation, recreation, quality of life, all of those things. Tell us a little bit about those sessions and what that timeline looks like.
Well, one of the areas that you didn't mention that is of especially interest to me is entrepreneurship and how we can encourage more people to start their own business or to grow their business. And that's something that we think is especially important for Milledgeville and Baldwin County because we bring a lot of people to Milledgeville, particularly with our higher education system and how we have folks here, we train them, we teach them about the ways of the world, and then they go back and leave and go somewhere else. We would like to retain a lot of that talent, and we think we can do that by helping people to get businesses started here in this area. So that was one of the things that we talked about. We talked about transportation, not only just our roads, condition of our roads, which is really pretty good, but the transportation system includes rail, includes air, it includes public transit, which is something that Milledgeville is not doing a real good job with right now. And there's some segments of the community that really depend on somebody other than themselves to get to places. They don't have a car or don't have a reliable car, and we don't have much in the way of public transit that helps in that regard. And then, of course, education. Our next task force meeting is going to be focusing on education solely because that is such a big component of what we have to do. And we just want to find ways that we can encourage excellence in our K through 12 system and how a community, regardless of where you might send your children or whether you have children that are in school or not, how a community can support it, support K through 12 education, because all of our kids deserve a good education. It doesn't matter whether they're black or white, rich or poor, they deserve a good education, and the community deserves a trained workforce, a group of kids that are coming up that are educated and can move into a job for the 21st century.
Yeah. Well, Johnny, as you mentioned, this is a process. It's not something that happens overnight, and it's been interesting to watch it develop. And some things have moved quicker or slower than anticipated based on the information that we feel like we need to get and digging deeper into various topics. So what's your projection on when we might see a plan, a first look at a plan? And kind of the what's next?
Well, we've already started creating a vision statement. We've got a draft of a vision statement that the task force is reviewing right now. We will be working on the elements of the plan at our next task force meeting, which will be in late May. We hope to have a draft plan that the task force can start tearing apart and reviewing and changing and editing, and then begin to have the plan and then the implementation action items created during the summer. And so by the time we all get back to school in August, I hope we have the plan ready to roll out.
Well, great. I can't wait to see it. And thank you so much to Johnny Grant for being with us. In our next segment, I'll sit down with Elyse Cochran-Davis of Bridge Concepts to talk about their role in the planning process.
Listen now, can you hear the bluebirds? Oh, look up now, can you feel the sun? Whoa, 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 whoa. Can
smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life.
Ready or not, here I come.
Take time to be a dad today.
Daddy, I'm gonna find you.
Welcome back to MBC Connect. I'm April Bragg, and here with me is Elyse Davis of Bridge Concepts. Elyse, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'm glad to have you with us on the show and in town as we're continuing to work on this community-wide strategic plan. Tell us a little bit about your company. I know you're no stranger to me personally, but new to Milledgeville. So tell us a little bit about your philosophy and what you guys do.
Bridge Concepts is a new company that we formed last June after spending 27 years in community and economic development, all at the local level. And through that network, shortly after the company was formed, we have a strong network with the State Department of Economic Development. And our regional rep connected me with Matt Pointer, and of course I'd already known you, April, through our chamber connection, and I was invited to come to the community for the first time. And what Matt had asked me to do is just, hey, I've been here a little over a year. He told me a little bit about the history of the program and the economic development effort, and just said, you know, our board would like just an outside sort of perception of how we are, how we're doing in the area of economic development, and that's what got me here.
Yeah, right.
Then shortly thereafter we started talking more, and I met more people in the community, and it became very apparent that the community realized that it was in a transition phase from having been in the past and several decades a center for government jobs, many of those that have left. And of course the commonality, I think, my experience in Dalton with the which was my last local job, and the transition that community was making from being all floor covering, losing 15,000 jobs and trying to transition, I think really helped to prepare me to come to the community and hopefully help the community in this transition phase. My role in this process of this community-wide plan, of course, is facilitating the process. The plan belongs to the community. And the leadership in the community that brought Bridge Concepts here to work in this role realizes, I believe, I'm totally convinced that everyone realizes that this has to be a community-wide initiative. It can't be led by one organization singly, or one group of people that maybe traditionally has led everything in the community, that this initiative has to go out into the tentacles of the every part of Baldwin County. And that is what the essence of this plan has been. And the key difference is the implementation strategy and the governance structure that we'll put in place that represents people from within all of those different segments in the community, in the actually doing, writing the plan. It can be like all of the other plans that most communities have that go on a shelf. If you're not careful.
Exactly. Well, and one of the things that really struck a chord with me in one of our first conversations about this, and as you mentioned, I've known you actually since my second week on the job. I went to Chamber Institute 5 days after starting at the Chamber, and you were one of my instructors for basic economic development class my very first year. And so I've had the privilege of being, acquainted with you, but, it really struck me, not only is there an implementation plan, but you guys will be with us for 12 months to make sure that we fully understand and embrace these and that we have benchmarks. So talk a little bit about your involvement during the implementation and what that looks like for somebody who hasn't been through that process before.
The key, again, is for the community to understand that this process belongs to them. And so the implementation, as far as structuring the process, it is very key to have people from all over the community that are going to be working in the key areas. once the strategic plan is set up to focus on, short term, I envision it focusing on 3 or 4 key areas. And the plan may be set up in terms of implementation for a 5-year period. But what we truly envision, this will be a 20 to 30-year process.
Because it's an evolution.
It is.
Yeah.
And the economy changes. See, most of us are from Georgia. We grew up in a city somewhere in Georgia, perhaps, or wherever we grew up. And that might have been part of a larger jurisdiction that we call in Georgia counties. We see those barriers. Well, what has happened in the last 10 years, we truly have become part of a global network.
Yeah.
And the companies that invest in our community, the new people that come in that represent other cultures and other facets in life, they don't see the barriers that all of us grow up in.
Sure.
So it is really important for us out of the chute to create you don't want to look too far out. We have to realize it'll be a fluid process. It will change as the economy or local conditions change. It will need to have the flexibility to change. But also it has to be a plan that can be the performance that can be measured long-term beyond just the written portion, that we will put performance measures in there and put a governance structure that is made up of local people. And what our role will be is now with electronics and all of the social networks that we have, we envision a lot of the implementation happening through those means. As well. So long term, we want to be on site long enough to make sure everything is in place for a long-term outcome that's sustainable.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of sustainable, how do we go about sustaining this? I know you and I have talked offline about implementation, but you've got to have investment, both in terms of commitment, dollars, all of that, and of course a feasibility study I'm sure is in the mix. Give us a quick synopsis of what all of that looks like and that process.
Well, very quickly, what we hope this planning process will do, it will identify all of the resources that may be available regionally and across the state as well as across the community. So we will need volunteers, we will need people to get involved, but we will also, like anything else, nothing is free.
Yeah.
So while you have so many rich resources here that other communities 3 times your size don't have, you can capitalize on those. You're still going to need revenue. So what we will recommend as part of the planning process is, as a next step for the community, to do a feasibility study to see what level of true engagement people may have outside of their physical involvement. If everybody gives a little, if if you have an opportunity for every citizen in this community, whether it be a large sum of money, maybe from corporate investors, to it could be citizens, to set up a framework that everybody can invest in their future and participate at whatever level that they could. But beyond the actual planning process that we should complete in the summer, hopefully the next step would be the feasibility study and setting the priorities based on how many financial and staff resources you have.
Yeah, well, great. Well, Elyse, it's exciting to be along for the ride and watch this develop. For our viewers, you can find information about the planning process and where we are on our timeline at the Chamber's website, which is milledgeville.ga.com/developmbc, and we'll provide that link for you. And then Elyse, I hope to get you back here once we've got a plan and a package ready to roll out to the community, and we'll just let everybody know what's coming around the bend. So
we're really excited to be part of the process, and we love this community, and we're going to look forward to the great things that are going to happen going forward.
Great. Well, thank you for being with us. Thank you for joining us for this week's edition of MBC Connect. We'll see you back next time.